Hello everyone, I welcome you all to Simplilearn. In today's session, we'll deep dive into Node.js framework and we'll discuss each and everything that you need to master this framework. We'll start this topic by discussing what is Node.js and how you can install Node.js in your laptop or desktop, and we'll end with the interviews questions that are frequently asked in the Node.js interviews. So watch the video till the end. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so that you never miss an update.
Welcome to this video by Simplilearn. In today's session, we're going to learn all about Node.js. So without further ado, let's begin and look at what's in store for us. First up, we'll understand what exactly Node.js is. Then we'll understand the necessity of Node.js. Then we'll learn about some of the parts of Node.js, Node.js Express framework, Node.js use cases, and finally we'll look at some of the industry trends. So what exactly is Node.js? Now consider a scenario where a user interacts with a web application. The user only interacts with the front end of the application. But there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. Now in a web application, there's a front end, a server, and a database. The front end is developed using JavaScript and frameworks like Angular and React, while the server is built on Java, PHP, or Node.js, and the backend database that stores the data usually consists of mysql or MongoDB. So Node.js is an open source, cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment for running server-side applications. It is used to develop I/O-intensive web applications like video streaming sites, single-page applications, online chatting applications, and other web applications. It is used by large, established companies and newly minted startups. Node.js was developed by Ryan Dahl in 2009, and at the same time of this session, its latest version is v13.3.0. Now that we know what Node.js is, let's go ahead and look at why it was so prevalent in the field of web development. Here are a few points. First up, Node.js is extremely fast. Being built on Google Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine, its library is extremely fast in code execution. Node Package Manager has around 50,000 bundles for developers, so whatever functionality is required for an application can be easily imported from NPM. All APIs of Node.js library are asynchronous, that is non-blocking. It means a Node.js-based server never waits for an API to return data. Node.js dramatically reduces the processing time while uploading video and audio files. It is also an open source platform and is easy for beginners for web development. The above reasons more than justify the popularity of Node.js platform and why it is being adopted by a large number of organizations and businesses today. So now moving on, let's familiarize ourselves with the parts of Node.js. Node.js consists of several components. Now let's look at them one by one. First up, we have modules. Now modules are like JavaScript libraries which are used in a Node.js application to include a set of functions. Now we can use required function with a parenthesis to include a module in a Node.js application. Node.js application has many modules to provide basic functionality needed for a web application. Some of them could be HTTP, util, fs, URL, query string, stream, and zlib. Next up, we have console. The console module provides a simple debugging console that is similar to the JavaScript console mechanism provided by web browsers. Now the console can print messages to stdout that print standard output messages and stderr to print the error messages. The next component is cluster. Now Node.js is built upon the concept of single threading programming. A single instance of Node.js runs in a single thread. To take advantage of multi-core systems, the user will sometimes want to launch a cluster of Node.js processes to handle the load. A cluster can be added to an application in this way. Here's a small code for you. The next component is global. Now global objects in Node.js are available in all modules. Now these objects are functions, modules, strings, etc. Some Node.js global objects are mentioned in the table. You have dir name, that is a directory name, file name, exports, module, and require. The next component is error handling. Now Node.js applications experience 4 types of errors. We have the standard JavaScript errors, system errors, user-specific errors, and assertion errors. Now errors in Node.js are handled through exceptions. Now for example, let's handle an error that would occur when we divide a number by 0. Now this error would crash the Node.js application, and so we should handle this error. Here's a small code for you. Next up, we have streaming. A stream is an abstract interface for working with streaming data in Node.js. Streams are objects that let you read data or write data continuously. There are 4 types of streams. First one is the readable. These are the types of streams from which data can be read. Writable, these are the types of streams to which data can be written. Duplex, these are both readable and writable streams. Lastly, we have transform. These streams can manipulate the data while it is being read or written. Moving on to the next component, buffer. The JavaScript language has no mechanism for reading or manipulating streams of binary data. Buffer is a module that allows handling streams that contain only binary data. An empty buffer of length 10 can be created by this method. Next up, we have domain. Domains provide a way to handle different I/O operations as a single group. Domain module intercepts errors that remain unhandled. There are two types of methods that are used for intercepting these errors. Firstly, we have internal binding. In this case, the error emitter executes its code inside the error method. Next up is the external binding. Now here, the error emitter is explicitly added to a domain via its add method. The next component is the DNS. The DNS module enables name resolution. For example, it is used to look up the IP addresses of host names. DNS module is used to connect to a DNS server and perform name resolution by using the method dns.resolve. The DNS module is also used for performing name resolution without a network communication by using the method dns.lookup. The next component is the debugger. Node.js includes an out-of-process debugging utility accessible via a V8 inspector and built-in debugging client. This Node.js debugger is not feature-packed but supports simple inspection of code. It can be used in the terminal by using the inspect keyword before the name of the JavaScript file. In order to inspect a file, say mysql.js, you can use the following method. Now that we are familiar with all the major parts of Node.js, let's go ahead and learn about the Node.js Express framework. Express is a flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a wide set of features to develop both web and mobile applications. You can assume Express as a layer built on top of the Node.js that helps manage the server and the routes. Now let's have a quick look at some of the core features of Express framework. It is used to design single-page, multi-page, and hybrid web applications. It allows the setting up of middleware to respond to HTTP requests. It defines a routing table that is used to perform different actions based on the HTTP method and URL. It also allows dynamic rendering of HTML pages based on passing arguments to templates. Now moving on, let's take a quick example of a simple Hello World program. Now this is developed using Express framework to gain a better understanding. Alright, first up we have the var express. Now this is used to import Express framework into our Node.js application. Now the app.get method is a callback function with parameters request and response. The request object represents the HTTP request and has properties for the request query string, parameters, body, HTTP headers, etc. The response object represents the HTTP response that an Express app sends when it gets an HTTP request. Now the application will listen to the defined port, which in this case is 8081, and variables host and port will contain the address and the port respectively. Lastly, we have the console.log, which is used to show the address and port in the command prompt. So this is what the command prompt would look like. And finally, the output is displayed on the web browser. Having learned about the Express framework, now let's move on and look at the Node.js use cases. Now it is no doubt that Node stands out for its speed and intensive data exchange. So top industry leaders like NASA, PayPal, Netflix among others incorporate Node.js. First up, we have Netflix. The world's leading internet television network with over 117 million users is one of the top companies that trusted their services to Node.js. The reasons why the company chose to use Node.js were application scalability and data-intensive application. Now you must be wondering what application scalability is. It's basically the potential of an application to grow in time, being able to efficiently handle more and more requests per minute. And data-intensive application allows millions of people to stream Netflix simultaneously. Next up is Walmart. Now Walmart is the world's largest company by revenue with around $514 billion US according to the Fortune Global 500 list in 2019. Again, the reasons why the company chose Node.js were asynchronous I/O and efficient handling of concurrent requests. Now asynchronous I/O, which is a form of input-output processing, allows other processing to continue before the transmission has finished. Node.js is able to efficiently handle concurrent requests with the use of thread pool and event queues. Uber. Uber is an American multinational ride-hailing company offering services that include peer-to-peer ride-sharing, ride service hailing, and food delivery. The reasons why the company chose Node.js were asynchronous I/O, quick iterations, and active open source community. As mentioned earlier, asynchronous I/O permits other processing to continue before the transmission has finished. Now quick iterations. Now Node.js is continually being updated and added new features that help in further improvement in the performance of web servers. And finally, active open source community resolves many problems that an organization may face in a particular scenario. Next up, we have NASA. Now, NASA is an independent agency of the United States federal government responsible for the civilian space program as well as aeronautics and aerospace research. The reasons why the company chose Node.js were reduced access times, handling of data-intensive tasks, and the fact that the servers are active 24/7. Now, NASA has lots and lots of data, and using Node.js has really helped them in reducing the access times. It is also continuously handling and working with large streams of data. Node.js is highly stable, which helps in keeping the server active 24/7. Next up, we have PayPal. Now, PayPal is an American company operating a worldwide online payment system that supports online money transfers as opposed to traditional methods like checks and money orders. The reasons why the company chose to use Node.js were the fact that Node.js has extremely fast build times. It allows tasks to be carried out with fewer lines of code when compared to other server technologies like Java and PHP. And Node.js, being data intensive, efficiently handles a large amount of data. Next up is Medium. Medium is a popular online publishing platform developed by Evan Williams and launched in August 2012. The main reasons why the company chose to use Node.js were A. Data-driven applications. Now, these applications are ideal for being interfaced with Node.js servers. B. To run A/B tests. Now, A/B testing is essentially an experiment where two or more variants of a page are shown to users at random, and statistical analysis is used to determine which variation performs better. Lastly, Node.js server maintenance is simpler than its counterparts. Moving on to the last topic of this session, industry trends. Now, Node.js developers are in demand across the globe since many companies are adopting JavaScript libraries. According to Forbes, it is one of the top 10 most in-demand jobs. According to NodeSource, the total number of Node.js downloads increased by 40% in the last 1 year. The use of Node.js in production has increased dramatically since its release in 2010. With early adopters such as LinkedIn, PayPal, and Netflix, among others, Node.js has seen an exponential increase in its use in web development. The popularity of Node.js is also accounted to JavaScript. Now, since JavaScript is the most popular language, as evident from a survey conducted by Stack Overflow in 2019, many developers can start working on Node.js library with not much of a learning curve. Node.js developers are being offered better salary options than other web technology developers. According to PayScale, the average salary of a Node.js developer in India is around 6,13,000 rupees per year. The average salary of a Node.js developer across the United States is around $105,000 per year. In this video, we'll help you install Node.js on your Windows system. So without further ado, let's begin. The first thing you need to do is download Node.js from their official website. So go ahead and type download Node.js. Navigate to their official website, and here you can see the 64-bit version. So go ahead and download that. Once the download is done, go ahead and run the downloaded Node.js installer. Accept the license agreement. Keep the default settings as it is. And then say install. So with that, we finished the installation process. Once Node has been successfully installed, the next crucial step is verification. Now this process ensures that Node has been properly installed. To do so, we first open the command prompt and then type in a few commands. To verify the successful installation, we type in this command, node-v. Now this command returns the version, and if it returns the version, it means it has been successfully installed. So here we go, it returns the latest version. Now the final step is to update the Node package manager. Now this NPM is bundled with Node.js, which consists of all the repositories and packages required for development purposes. So to do that, type in the command npm install npm -- global. Now that we're done with the installation of Node, let's go ahead and implement a small program. For that, we make use of a text editor. In our case, we've installed VS Code. So go ahead and download VS Code. Once you're done with the installation, this is what VS Code looks like. So go ahead and click on File and create a new file. It's going to be a simple program where you're going to print a hello world message on the web browser. To do that, we make use of HTTP modules. So Node comes with built-in HTTP modules to transfer data across it. So for that, we make use of a require method. We create a variable first, say var http equals require, and just say http within single quotes. Now the HTTP module can create an HTTP server that listens to the server ports and gives a response back to the client. To do that, we make use of the create server method. So let's go ahead and type the code. Say http dot create server, and internally it consists of a function. Now the parameters to this function are request and response. Now the response is basically used to write to the client. So we say response.write, and here we type in the message. Say hello world, welcome to this tutorial. Once you're done with that, you end the response. So the server listens to a port number to display the message. By default, it listens to the port number 8080. So we keep that as it is and we end it. Save your file, say demo.js, maybe demo1.js, and say save. Now to run the program, you have to open the command prompt. So open your command prompt and mention the path to your file. So in our case, it's our saved on the desktop. So cd desktop. And now to run it, say node demo1.js. Now you navigate to your browser and say localhost 8080, and here we go. Our message is successfully displayed.
Today we're going to jump into Node.js and the architecture around Node.js. So why would you want to get involved with working with Node.js? Well, there's actually a lot of great reasons. A lot of the top web applications that you are working on today are built with Node.js. And the architecture beneath it allows you to not only just build those web applications, but to be able to build end-class applications. And by end-class, we're meaning microservice-driven applications, so applications that are running on your phone, on your desktop, on your tablets. They can all be built with Node.js. And there are huge advantages around working with Node.js. One of the biggest ones being the huge community around Node.js. Node.js is just one of those standard solutions that you use for building out your core architecture when you're building out an application. And there's just a lot of people out there that are using it. So let's jump into web applications and how it would be of benefit to you with your web solutions. So with Node.js, you have the client side and the server side. And the client side has the solutions that allow you to have hooks into the client side put together very easily. So behind the scenes of the client, you have servers, technology, and connections to your database. So if you're building out your solutions with Node.js, it makes it very easy to be able to architect the entire solution from top to bottom for your entire environment. Whether you're building that locally on a test server, whether you're building for a traditional data center, or if you're working in the cloud. So on the client, you're going to be using technologies such as React.js and Angular. In the server, you're going to be using Node.js, PHP, and Java. And then the database itself is going to be something like MySQL or MongoDB. And actually, the number of databases that can be supported with Node.js is increasing all the time. So when you're working with writing your code in Angular or React.js, you can even use Vue. That's actually a great one working with Node.js. You have this client-side framework that provides the hook into the web browser, whether it's a mobile web browser or a desktop web browser. The server is then responsible for taking those requests that are coming from the browser and interpreting them. And so on the server, you're going to run Node.js. You're going to run it alongside with PHP and Java. PHP, if you're not familiar, is a really great way to get started with writing web applications that run on the server. Java is just a really solid traditional application language for building out web apps. And then the server itself is going to be responsible for those client interactions with backend services, connecting with APIs, and reinforcing your security model. Now, can you do all of that in the client? Yes, you can do a lot of that in the client, particularly with the frameworks from Angular and Vue. They are really flexible. You can do some great things there. But one of the things you want to be looking at when you're working with building a web application is really three key things. One is security. The second is being able to scale your solutions, and the third is speed and responsiveness. And what I have found through my own architecture is that if I balance out between client and server, the load and the structuring of how you actually build those solutions, it really helps create a very seamless solution to your customer. And then at the back of all of this, you have your database, and MySQL and MongoDB are two popular databases, but you can also use Node.js to connect to many of the cloud databases that are running on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM, other services. They all have connectors in via Node.js into their databases. So let's talk about the Node.js architecture and understand why it's so good. So to begin with, Node.js has what's called a single-threaded event loop architecture, and this allows you to be able to handle many concurrent clients at the same time. It's just a very flexible way of being able to scale up your support for many clients. And then in addition to that, we have the JavaScript event-based model along with the JavaScript callback mechanism that allows you to have this standard approach to being able to connect with and talk and discuss interactions between the client and the server. It's good to have these kind of standards where you're not using something that's unique to a specific framework or a specific technology. This just makes it so it's more accessible for everybody. So if we look at the actual Node.js server itself, everything centers around the concept of the event loop. And the event loop has an event queue, an operation completed via requests, threaded pull, and then it'll actually do the actual computation or the file system interaction. All of this interconnects in a nice seamless loop. The great thing again with Node.js is that it's not new technology. It's been around for almost a decade. It's very well tried out. Many of the largest websites out there are running Node.js. So let's now dig into each of the parts of the Node.js architecture. So let's talk about requests. So the way that the request works is that you have your framework such as Angular on the client, and that will then send a request to the web server. And there's many ways that those requests can happen through web workers, through forms, and through other interactions. But at some point, a request is sent to the server. And so these requests can be for data, they can be for deleting data, they can be for updating data, they can be for interacting with services as mentioned before, but the goal is to have some kind of request. Now, once that request actually hits the server, and then we start actually getting into the queuing and threading process that centers around the event loop. And this is where Node.js really excels because it's able to use that single-threaded model to be able to manage from just even a few requests to tens of millions of requests. So it receives the actual request and starts the event queue. And this is where that single threading process starts, is by queuing everything up appropriately. And then it then maintains the threads within a pool. So you have the queuing process as one action, and then you have a threaded pool which manages those threads as well. And then we have an event loop, which goes through and actually receives and processes those requests. And then finally, what we're doing is we're actually then going to be interacting with a system, and that could be a database, it could be a cloud system, it could be an API, file system, but we're interacting with something that's outside of the Node.js server. So the Node.js server itself is doing some actions on the server, but then it's also interacting with things outside of its own server environment. And so let's talk a little bit about that workflow. So requests come in, they go into the event queue, and they get spiraled through the event loop. And then we have non-blocking operators, which are going to be doing the input-output polling, such as KQ, ePoll, and other services. And from there, we're also going to be then interacting with the threaded pool, and we're using the blocking operations to manage that threaded pool. And that threaded pool is going to now then go outside of the server and interact with something beyond the server. So whether that is a database or file system or API or microservice, these are the things that can be interacted with. And so let's go through some of these advantages that we have here. So I'm a fan of working with Node.js, so I have lots of advantages. So one of the big ones though right off the bat is the ability to be able to handle multiple client requests quickly and easily. This really is important as we move into our digital ecosystems and we start scaling up solutions. You'll find that as you build successful apps, the demand for those apps will grow exponentially. And what that means is you need to be able to have a solution that can interact with requests quickly and easily. There's no need to create multiple threads because of the event loop. Again, this is another thing that's really critical when it comes to building out solutions. You want to be able to have a solution that can scale massively at the flip of a switch. Now, particularly as we start working on building out cloud-based solutions. Node.js also utilizes really low resources and memory. Again, when it may seem like a small thing when you have a solution and it's using just maybe a small amount of memory, but if that solution keeps adding to that memory usage, you then restrict it for how big that application can grow. So the less resources and memory a solution is using, the faster and higher it can grow in scale. And we're going to be going through working with Node.js and Node Package Manager today. So let's go through why you'd want to sit through this tutorial and what you're going to learn. Well, first of all, we're going to talk about the Node.js modules and why Node.js being a modular architecture is of benefit and how you can leverage that. Then we're going to talk about what Node Package Manager is and how you can use it with the modular architecture. Why you'd want to use NPM. How we actually go through and do the installation of NPM. It's actually pretty easy, so you should be able to jump on that really quickly. Then we'll actually go ahead and actually go through the details of what it takes to create a package.json file with NPM. And finally, we'll do a live demo. We'll actually step through using terminal window to actually interact and build out an NPM package. So let's get started. Let's talk about Node.js modules first and understand the architecture and the modular structure behind Node.js so that you understand why it's so important to have NPM. So let's talk a little bit about modules. So modules in Node.js, they provide the functionality that you can use for your application. So the actual architecture of Node.js is built in such a way that it allows you to be able to create solutions and extensions very quickly and easily. So it has many modules that require different functionality for different applications that you can customize and modify to meet your needs. So some of the most popular modules that you have for Node.js include Express.js, which is becoming an ever more popular backend architecture for building out solutions. We have React.js, which is from Facebook. We have Node Daemon, an open source solution. And each of these modules are very big solutions in themselves, but you can also create smaller modules that would be of benefit to the types of applications you're creating. So you can kind of think of modules in a sense as microservices, so that you can actually build out solutions that you can reshare over and over. They're not quite the same, but similar kind of thought process for actually how you interact with them. So let's go through what NPM is. So NPM itself stands for the Node Package Manager. No great shakes there. As the name says, it's responsible for all the packages and modules that are bundled within Node.js. So the Node Package Manager itself really has two key functionalities. The first is that it is a central repository for all packages and modules, which you can then search through online. You can go to search.nodejs.org and you can find all of the packages and modules that are out there. The second is that it's also a command line or terminal line utility that allows you to install those packages. So you can actually go through and you can see the version management and dependencies within those packages, and you can control the packages themselves. So why would you use NPM? So NPM is really useful for being able to extend the project you're working on. So when you're building out a project, one of the concepts I like to use is the concept of Lego bricks. Big fan of Lego. And what's great about Lego bricks is that they're all individually by themselves, very small, very specific functionality. But if you actually get a whole collection of Lego bricks together, you can build like crazy cool things. So think of when you're working with the Node Package Manager itself, is that each of those individual pieces that you're working with, each of those individual packages are their own Lego bricks, and by themselves you can then edit and update and maintain that piece separately from the whole environment. As long as your inputs and outputs, really the piece where you snap the Lego in or when you connect the Lego to something else, are interacted and open and well documented, then you can actually then use those modules effectively throughout your project. So you can actually then be able to do that. You can do version control on your codes and dependencies. You can do testing very easily. And then once you actually get to the point where you go, yes, I want to release a new module, you can do that effectively using NPM, and it will actually go through and do the actual deployment for you. So let's go through the NPM installation. So the actual package manager itself is included with the installation of Node.js. So if you've installed and you're running Node.js locally, then you've already installed the package manager. But you can also access it through command line or terminal window on your data server or in your server farm or via the cloud. If you haven't now downloaded Node.js, here's the website where you can go down to install it, and there's Windows and Mac versions of that code as well with the installers, which allow you to get up and going very quickly. You want to be able to run the installer and accept all the default settings. To begin with, you want to kind of have the standard setup so that you are most familiar with the normal settings before you start getting to the point where you're a master and you're tweaking things. There is a way that you can open up the command window or the terminal window. And once you've actually installed Node.js, to verify that it's actually installed, you can write the command node-version, and it'll actually then pull out the version of Node.js that you have installed, and then you'll be able to see that you've got it actually up and running. And then you can also do the same thing for NPM. You can do npm-version, and it actually will then show you which version of the Node Package Manager you have running, so you can actually take full advantage of that program and verify that it's actually up and running. So let's actually look inside of a package. So packages themselves are actually just JSON files. If you're new to this space, JSON file is a structured file format that's based on JavaScript. It's a very XML-like format for being able to write instructions for the actual package itself. And so the JSON file forms really kind of the heart of each package you create. It has all of the metadata that you'd have about a particular object, and then it provides a root directory to any of the applications or modules that the package may be referencing. In addition, it has any other additional information about the project such as dependencies and other files that need to be included. So here we have is an example of a package that would be created using npm JSON script. And you can actually take this package file as it is right here and use the command npm init, and it'll actually run this package. And so you would actually then have a demo application up and running really quickly. You can then go ahead, if you want to, you can edit any of these parameters. So like, for instance, if you wanted to change the description or the version, or what is the main index script that would be written, these are all things that you can edit very quickly and easily. You can just use text editor to make any of these edits. And so we have the different metadata that can be updated. And so this is where we go in and do a full demo of working with NPM. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go ahead and actually run a demo of using NPM. And to do that, I've got 3 windows in front of me right now. So I have this window here, which is my terminal window, where I'll be doing all of my instructions. Then I also have a folder which shows where I'll be putting all of the files. And then finally, I'll actually have a text editor. In this case, I'm using VS Code because it's free, but you can use any text editor you like to be able to go in and show what the code that's been created by NPM in the JSON file, so you can actually see what it looks like. And then we'll modify it a little bit. So first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create a new project folder. So I'm going to go in, I'm just going to move into, I'm going to do change directory and go into the project folder, and we'll see down here that we have an empty project folder, but for this one I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new directory in this one, and I'm going to call this one Simplilearn. And there we are, we've created a new Simplilearn folder, and we are going to move into the Simplilearn folder. And so we're now in the Simplilearn folder. There's nothing in there right now. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and initialize this folder as a project folder for working with NPM. Now to do this, you will have to have already installed NPM. If you have Node.js, NPM comes with it. And if you want to see whether or not you have NPM installed, so you can just do npm-version. And that will actually tell you what the version of NPM you have installed is. And it also verifies that NPM is installed. So I've gone ahead and I've been able to validate that I have NPM installed. So what I'm now going to go ahead and do is I'm going to initialize this folder. So to do that, just do npm init. And you'll see that the path is that we're already in the Simplilearn folder. And then when you do that, it's going to ask you some questions. So what is the package name? We're going to go with the defaults for right now, and then I can show you how we can edit those in a little bit. We're going to go with just say yes to all of these just by hitting return. And you'll see here that we're going to create a new folder called a package.json folder. This is the instructions that we have in the folder. Do we want to go ahead and create this? We want to. And it's going to go ahead and do that. And we can see now in our folder here that we actually have package.json. So we go ahead and open this up with VS Code. Here we are. We can actually see what all of the information is. We can go ahead and we can actually go and update this metadata if we want to. I'm going to leave it as is for right now because I want to show you a couple of other things. So a lot of times when you're actually working with NPM, and the reason why you're using NPM is that you want to take advantage of packages that are freely available in the open source community that are supported by Node.js. And one of those is a package called Express. And Express is a lightweight framework for building out web applications, similar in concept to Angular or React.js. I like using it, and it's also a great way to be able to show how we can install this using NPM. So to install this, you just start with the command npm and then you type install. And then we type the name of the package. We hit enter and it goes ahead. And what you'll actually see is a couple of things. One is we have a dependency in our package path. We also have, so this is in our JSON package, that is now a dependency that's written in there. We can also go in and under our node modules, we actually see that we have, we scroll down, we should see Express. There it is, Express. Now, if we decide that we don't want to use Express, we can actually just come in and we can write command npm uninstall. I can type Express. Oops, I did a typo there, so let's try that again. npm uninstall Express. And a couple of things can happen. One is in our JSON file, the dependency for the Express file has now been removed. And we can also see that under our node modules, there are no extensions there. So this is kind of cool. This allows us to be able to see that we can easily add and remove packages. So let's just go ahead and I'm going to install Express again. So install Express. Oops. npm install Express. All right, so it's gone ahead and it's installed Express. Now, one of the things that will often happen is that when you're working with a package, the actual JSON package, so you'll receive this file, and you want to be able to go ahead and install all of the sub-modules that come with it. So you can go through and you can manually install them like this, or you can actually run an install command so you can actually install all of them at once. I can just show you what that looks like, because we're going to actually go ahead and simulate as if we're going to install Bootstrap, which is another popular framework. Bootstrap. And we're actually going to go with, and then we'll save that. And what we'll see is under the packages that Bootstrap isn't listed in there. We do have Express. There it is right there. So if we now come over to our new commands, we can actually write the command npm install. And now slight typo, let's try that again. Let's do npm install. Okay, it does help to save your file. So let's go ahead and let's run npm install. And when you do that, what we'll now actually have is not just Express, but we'll also see that Bootstrap has also been added. Now, I don't recommend that you use the star symbol, which will install the latest version of Bootstrap, because you obviously haven't tested your application against that, but it gives you an idea of what's happened here. Now, if we want to, we can actually go in here and we can say uninstall Bootstrap, and it will actually remove that from your JSON package. So there we are. That's how you work with using NPM, from getting started with a setup for a base initialization of your package, going through to creating the first package, being able to set up and control the naming convention for each of the items within the metadata that provides the instruction for the package, how you can then put in dependencies such as Express and Bootstrap, how you can install them and remove them, and actually do all of this through command line. If you have any questions, please let us know. And today we're going to talk about how you can take MySQL, a very popular open source database, and Node.js, a very popular architecture for building up web applications, and pull the two of them together, and why you'd want to do that. So let's jump in. So first of all, let's cover why you'd want to go through this tutorial. So we're going to cover what MySQL is. We're also going to tell you how we're going to connect with Node.js and why you'd want to do that with MySQL. And then finally, we're going to do a demo taking you through all the steps on how you can actually do that kind of connection. So what is MySQL? Well, basically, MySQL is probably the world's most popular relational database. So if you think of relational databases that are table-driven, MySQL is arguably the most popular database out there for RDBMS systems. It is by far the most popular open source relational database. The entire database is written in C and C++. It's been around for a really long time. Again, it's open source, which is great, which means that there are no licenses or costs for actually using MySQL. And you'll find that companies of all sizes, from small mom and pop shops all the way up to massive global enterprises, are all using MySQL. So, why would you want to then take that next step of connecting Node.js with MySQL? Well, fundamentally, it comes down to the basics of the differences between the two products. MySQL is a database, and Node.js is an architecture framework for building out web applications. Again, with MySQL, it's open source. It's free to use. You don't have to pay anything. There are no licenses, which, if you compare it with other solutions out there, is a big deal. MySQL, even though it is open source, is incredibly powerful. It's one of the more mature open source programs out there. I think Apache is probably arguably more, Apache web server is probably more mature, but MySQL is very close behind it. So it has had a huge amount of investment. This is not a solution that's only a couple of years old. We're talking about a solution that's more than 15 years old, very, very structured, very powerful, and you can do a lot of really good things with it. You can actually then build solutions with it using PHP, Java, really any kind of database, even other systems and other frameworks will allow you to interact with MySQL. And it just allows you to work with just huge amounts of data very, very quickly. So let's go through a demo of how you'd actually use Node.js and MySQL.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started by putting our Node environment together. So let's start by selecting Node.js and downloading it. So we'll go to nodejs.org. And there you have your options for Windows, Mac, or if you want to go for the source code, you can go ahead and download and install that. The next is to install XAMPP. So we're going to go to XAMPP installers for a quick search, and that's on our ApacheFriends.org site. And here we have XAMPP available for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X. And then finally, we want to go ahead and install Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is going to be our IDE, our integrated development environment. In this instance, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. If you don't use Visual Studio Code, it's a great free open source solution for being able to build applications. I'm a big fan of it, so I encourage you to use it. Go ahead and download, install that. And we have Visual Studio code up and running. So go ahead and we're going to open up a new folder. And let's go ahead and create a new folder. We'll just put it straight off our desktop here. And it's just for kicks and giggles. So we're just going to type in Node MySQL for our source code. And we'll open up that folder and select that. And so we now have this folder selected in our Visual Studio Code editor. And what we want to do is we want to get rid of the welcome page. We don't really need that anymore. And we're going to terminal window so we can actually see the scripts that we're writing. We're going to be using terminal quite a bit in this. So for instance, we're just going to test that we have NPM installed. We do, so that's great. And we're going to go npm init, and that's actually going to set up our own node package module. And we can actually see that the JSON file for that package has been created. So we go in there, we can see that all the defaults are selected. You'll see that index.js is the default file that will be created. So we're actually going to go ahead and we're actually going to create our own index.js file, and we're going to add in some instructions into that file to actually install the correct software from the NPM package. And the first thing we want to do is install Express, which is a package that's great for building lightweight web applications, not mobile applications. I suppose if you're doing a responsive design, then I guess it would be mobile. But in this, it's a web application environment. So we're going to put in the requirements for that, and then we're going to also go and require that MySQL gets installed. And you'll see that for both of them, we're just going to use NPM's default commands for creating that, and we'll go down to the terminal window and we'll do npm install, and it's going to install the Express and MySQL environment. And as that installs, you'll actually see on the left-hand side under the folder, you'll actually see the files starting to be installed. So for instance, we have the node modules, and underneath that will be all the subsequent files that we need. And there we are. Everything is installed. All right, so let's go ahead and validate some of these commands to make sure everything is installed. So we're going to open up XAMPP, which allows us to go in and view and see that everything's installed. So we have MySQL installed, we have Apache installed. We can start and stop the services with XAMPP. Go ahead and do that. You can do this through terminal window as well, but the UI interface is really nice. So let's go into my SQL interface, and you'll see that we don't have any databases. These are all just the standard test databases, and so we have to go ahead and create one. And so let's get our SQL database connection created. So we're going to write const db equals MySQL create connection. And we want to connect to the local host in this instance. And user is just going to be a root user account, which is the standard user account that comes from MySQL. There is no password for the root user when you're running it locally, but I encourage you to change that as quickly as you can, because you don't really want to have a password-free environment. And now we want to be able to then connect to the MySQL environment. So we'll write db.connect, parentheses error, and we want to throw an error message if the connection isn't good. So if we do error, we'll throw the error message to the log window. And if we don't, then we'll write MySQL connected. All right. And then we want to connect that to our Express app. The next step we want to do after we made our connection is to go ahead and create a database. So we're going to do both steps at the same one. So we're writing the script right now, and then we'll run the commands in the terminal window so we can actually create a database. And so we're going to go ahead and we want to create a database. And let's write let SQL equals create database, and we're going to call the database Node MySQL. You can call it whatever you want, but this is just a Node MySQL script. The db query SQL error throw error message res.send database created. So we'll throw a message saying that the database has been created. Let's go save that to demonstrate that we've connected and we've created a database. So let's go ahead and we'll do node index.js to run that, and we've connected to MySQL. That's great. Good first step. And then we'll go to the window and we'll go to localhost 3000, which is the default connection. But what you'll see is that we've actually created the name of the database has been changed to node MySQL. So we've got an error message, which we expected. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to say we want to listen. And if the error message comes out to 3000, then in the console window, we want to put a message of server started on port 3000. So let's try that again. Node index.js. Yep, and server has started on port 3000. We'll refresh that. Nope, still getting an error message. And what we want to see is, let's go ahead and see our database hasn't been created. So let's go and connect to database. The database is, let's go ahead and click create DB on port 3000. All right, so by doing that, we run that command and that function, and that goes ahead and creates our database. And we'll actually see that we have now node MySQL has been created, which is a great first start. Now we have to go in and create some tables because we have no tables in here. All right, so let's go down and let's go ahead and create a table. So what you're seeing right now is that we're using the index.js environment within a package on Node.js to actually create and control everything that we want to see in our windows. So all of the work that we're doing for creating a table, for creating the database, for initializing the core files, it's all being done through JS. And so here we are, we're going to create a new table. We call it it's going to be called the employee table. And so once we run the command create employee, it's going to create a table, has the employee fields, which is going to have an ID, which will be an integer that will go into auto increment. It'll have a name field. We'll also put in a designation field. And we'll have a primary key as well. Keep it very simple for right now. And let's just put our DB connection so that everything connects effectively. Okay, so if everything goes correctly, then we'll have the message employee table created. So let's test this out. And node.index.js. Make sure that the data we have now actually a database field that we can connect to. So we've got node MySQL, so we're connecting to the correct database. Otherwise we get an error. And then we'll try that again. Yay, we connected to the database. So the database has the name. And because we've got node MySQL, there's no fields in there yet. So let's go ahead and and we put in create employee for the fields, and that's run the function that creates the new table. And then voila, we have a new table. And so the next action we want to do is actually populate the table with a record. So this starts becoming familiar. So we're now going to put in a single record. We'll call it employee 1 for right now. We'll write the function employee 1, and when we run that function, it'll actually go ahead and it'll actually insert the record into MySQL. And the name will be Jake Smith, and the designation will be a Chief Executive Officer. Certainly encourage you to put your own name into this, make yourself your own CEO, because why not? And we're going to make this as an insert record. We're going to insert into the employee table. And we're just using some basic SQL scripting here. And what you'll see actually with Visual Studio Code is that it's actually providing a lot of prompts to make it easier to write your code. Microsoft is looking to actually add some AI to Visual Studio Code to actually start auto-completing scripts, which will make it even easier to write your code. All right, so let's go run node index.js. We see we've got everything connected, and we'll grab the function employee1, and let's go over to our Express site. And let's just go and we'll insert the command employee1. Employee has been added, and we will just validate this by going back to MySQL, and we'll refresh it. And what you'll see, if we click on the employee table, is we should now have an employee in there. Yep, there we do. Jake Smith. Well done, Jake. First record. All right, so we want to be able to now select the employee. So let's go ahead and do that. And we want to be able to easily get the employee list. So let's use our SQL command, and we'll do select star, which is everything from the employee table. So we're actually pulling everything from the employee table. We're going to query the database. Let's throw a message to confirm that the query is successful. We'll put everything in the console log results. All right, let's give this a whirl. Okay, so let's go and run our command. Localhost 3000, and we'll put get employee, and it says employee details fetched. Now we go to the console window in Visual Studio. Yep, there we go. We have now all the packet information, including the ID about Jake Smith. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can actually update the employee information. So as you can see, now we're starting to run into just our standard SQL commands. And so we want to be able to update the employee from a browser. And as you can tell, we're not using any forms or any other types of records. We're just simply interacting between the browser, the server, and the database. And the new name will be updated name. And we have to make sure we're updating the appropriate record. And we want to make sure that we're matching against ID 1. Alright, so let's run that again. And the JSmith is there. Now go and select JSemployee :/1. We've now gone ahead and updated the JSmith information. So let's click on employee table, and we now see it says updated name. I know, not very creative, but it allows you to see a change. And finally, we can go ahead and delete the record as well. So it's going to be similar to update, but I'm deleting instead. And we're going to delete the record from the employee table, where name equals, where ID equals, sorry, and ID. And then we want to be able to show that the record has been deleted. Okay. Just say delete employee deleted, and we go to database. We can actually see from the employee table that there are no entries. The one and only record that was there has been deleted. And so this shows you how you can very easily control everything from using your connection into MySQL right from Node Package Manager. You can create a table, you can select your records, you can then update any record that you selected, And finally, you can delete any record that you want to be able to delete. And we're going to be going through some of the simple questions that you would be asked during a Node.js interview. What we're going to do is we're actually going to break out the section into 3 key areas. There'll be beginner questions, there'll be intermediate questions, and advanced questions. And the expectation is, as you go through this video, is that these questions could be pushed together as you're going through the interview. Kind of think of it like this: is if you've answered the beginner questions that you would get asked at the beginning of the interview with confidence and surety, then the client is going to then jump to those intermediate and advanced questions quite quickly. And they're looking for people who can help them serve and solve their problems at that more intermediate and advanced level. So let's just get started. So the first question you're probably going to be asked is, what is Node.js? Do you know what it's for? And essentially, Node.js is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, open source cross-platform JavaScript programs. It allows you to build out web applications that run on the server. It's extremely flexible. It allows you to implement a lot of solutions outside of just the core programming runtime. And it allows you to build solutions extremely quickly in an open source mindset for DevOps. It is used essentially for creating client-side web applications. We'll see this later on, and you may want to talk a little bit about using Express.js and how you can build out APIs to work with Node.js and connecting to databases such as MongoDB. And that is also really good for being able to store data-intensive applications that are asynchronous and event-driven in their model. And this is important when you're talking about creating applications that can scale rapidly. So you're going to then be asked, how does Node.js work? Well, Node.js itself is actually built on the V8 engine, and the V8 JavaScript engine is the same engine that runs JavaScript in your Chrome web browser extremely fast. It allows for high output and non-blocking through your I/O input and outputs, and is single-threaded event loop. So you're going to be then asked, where can you use Node.js? And the reality is the applications for Node.js keep expanding, but there are some core applications that you can work with Node.js right now. Such as web applications, distributed system, and network applications. Probably referencing the web applications is a really good starting point, because here you can actually talk about maybe some examples that you've done where you're building out some of these web applications. Indeed, one of the things that you want to be consistently doing and peppering your answers with is examples of work that you have done. Now, it doesn't matter if those examples are purely experimental or training examples that you've done. The fact that you've actually worked with Node.js and created a distributed system or a web application is really valuable, because it shows the person that you're meeting with that you have knowledge and understanding and practical experience of applying the theory of working with Node.js with the practice of working with Node.js. So be asked about, essentially the I/O refers to the transfer of data in and out of a system. And that's really it. And there's a reason why Google calls their conference I/O. It's the transfer of data in and out of our brains at their conference. The application is the same here. It's about moving data in and out of systems through using Node.js. And that every event can be tracked, whether it's on a physical device, a network, or files within a system. Again, it's input and output. So let's go through, and you're going to be asked, can you explain the difference between front-end and back-end development? And this is a question that I get asked a lot when I'm meeting with clients. People get really confused about what is the difference between front-end and back-end development. Bottom line, front-end is what gets resolved inside of your web browser or the app on your mobile device. Back-end is what gets resolved, essentially what we call the back office or server-side applications, but that's becoming more and more synonymous for what gets run in the cloud. So web applications really get a lot of the functionality of a web application gets run in the front end.
Anything with CSS, HTML5, client-side JavaScript, it's all going to get run in the front end. Everything else, such as connecting to a database, gets run behind the scenes in the back end. And anything that's going to have like graphics is going to be on the front end. APIs are going to be run on the back end. And then just finally, some of the scripting languages that you use on the front end. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, those are all common core scripting languages that you would use. You can use frameworks such as AngularJS and React.js or Vue. Those would be front-end frameworks. Back-end frameworks would include Java, PHP, Python, and Node.js are some of the back-end technologies. You could also throw in there .NET as well. It's just a whole litany of front-end and back-end technologies and frameworks that you can use. And this is actually a good point to kind of explain the experience you have outside of just working with Node.js, but other technologies that you've been working with that potentially that the client is also using. So another question you're going to be asked when you're looking at Node.js is, can you tell me about NPM? And so when somebody asks you what is NPM, the first thing you're going to respond is, do you mean Node Package Manager? And the reason why you want to respond like that is that you want to qualify their question with understanding that you know what they're talking about, but you want them to verify that. And so Node Package Manager is NPM. And it's responsible for packaging all of your modules that you're working with in Node.js. And we have a whole series of videos that we've done on Node.js, and every single one of them includes references to NPM. So you're going to be asked, okay, you told me what it is, can you go into a little bit more details, so can you provide two main functionalities? And so one of them is being able to manage online repositories of modules and packages. So you can go to like search.nodejs.org and you can find packages that you can install into your solution, such as Express.js. And it also provides a command line utility that allows you to manage your packages very quickly through terminal window or command line. I use VS Code a lot, Visual Studio Code, and it has a command line utility built right into it that allows me to interact with NPM. So what are some of the modules in Node.js? And so, modules in Node.js, they're essentially like JavaScript libraries. So you can think of some of the JavaScript libraries that you may have used. The functionality is somewhat the same, but they're designed for Node.js and to run on the server. And there are ways in which you can go ahead and create some of those modules. So for instance, if we're creating a web server, you can actually use the require command to be able to require that the server be there. So the example we have on the right-hand side shows that we really do need to have HTTP, which is a web server, and we require that to be installed. And so that if you're running that NPM package, it will actually install the HTTP server, and then you can actually write some code to actually then listen on the local host port 2000 for where you'll be running your application. And there are just, there's a whole bunch of modules that come with Node.js right out of the gate. And here are some of the modules that you have. We also referenced just earlier on, HTTP is a core module for running a web server. You have a utility function that is useful for developers to assess features within your Node.js project. You have a URL module for any URL parsing you'd be doing. And you also have a stream, which allows you to be able to stream data in and out of your system and be able to manage how that's being worked. And then zlib, which allows you to compress and decompress files so that you can keep your storage of files to a minimum. So a question you're going to be asked is, why is Node.js being preferred over backend technologies such as Java and PHP? And particularly with Java, it's a very mature, stable language. It's been around for more than 20 years. PHP runs some of the most powerful and largest websites out there, such as Facebook. So why would you use Node.js? Well, the first response is kind of a gimme, but it is really fast. And if you watched any of the videos that we've done on Node.js, building out solutions and developing the solutions, you'll see just how fast it is. The second is the really kind of the secret sauce with Node.js is the Node Package Manager. And the Node Package Manager allows you to install additional functionality such as Express or Mongo as a database into your solution really quickly. And there's over 50,000 bundles available for Node Package Manager. If you're building out a real-time application that's data intensive and you need to have APIs quickly developed, then Node.js is really the great solution for you. It allows you to build out these solutions really quickly. And there is easy synchronization between the server and the client due to the code base. And then finally, because the structure of Node.js is JavaScript, if you are making the pivot from being a front-end web developer to Node.js, it's just going to make it a lot easier for you to pick up Node.js because you have that common language of JavaScript. And on top of that, JavaScript is the world's most popular scripting language. So let's talk about some of the differences between Angular and Node.js. And so the reason why this question may come up is the person interviewing you is seeing whether or not you do know the difference between a front-end framework and a back-end framework. And this is one of those questions where you can go, well, there are differences, but the differences are because they complement each other. So Angular is a front-end development framework, whereas Node.js is a server-side framework. Other differences, though, between the actual frameworks themselves is that Angular is written in TypeScript, which is a modification of JavaScript. Node.js is written in C and C++. Angular is used for building out single-page client-side web applications. And so that's the key word there is client-side. Whereas Node.js is about building out fast and scalable server-side network applications. Again, the two complement each other. Angular splits web applications into the MVC and model view control components, whereas Node.js generates a lot of database queries. It does more than that as well, but you can think of Node.js as that glue to your database. So let's talk a little bit about when you're connecting to a database with Node.js. And so you're going to probably be asked, what is the most popular database used with Node.js? And there are a couple. MongoDB is largely the most popular NoSQL cross-platform database. MySQL is also very popular, and that's a more traditional relational database. You would go with MongoDB for really more modern solutions. When you're looking at creating an application that's going to really scale into just managing masses and masses of data that has to be created, read, updated, and deleted very, very quickly. For some of the other popular libraries that you use for Node.js, Express.js is a very popular one. I really like working with Express.js. It allows me to build out web applications really quickly. More importantly, it allows me to build out APIs very quickly, and which, APIs are essentially web applications themselves. But being able to do that very quickly with a framework like Express.js is very useful. Mongoose is an application that makes connecting to a Mongo database really easy. So here is an example of Express.js, which is in itself really a flexible but a solution that you can do lots with, and Mongoose, which is a more focused solution, which allows you make it easier to connect to your databases. So, what are the pros and cons of working with Node.js? There's lots of ways, and we explained this earlier on, that you can actually build out applications that run on the cloud. Why would what are the pros and cons? So a pro is that Node.js is extremely fast at processing an event-based model. It really is fast. A con is if you have something that is a very heavy computational task, it's not so good at that. Now, I will caveat that this is that Node.js is getting better all the time. And so you might have to provide an example of what a very heavy computational task is. And that may be calculating a risk on an insurance application against many, many variables. That may be something that's seen as computationally very heavy. But what you can do in that example is you can then offload the task to another solution that's designed for it and use APIs to pass the data back and forth. JavaScript is used for building out your applications with Node.js. Great. Lots of people know JavaScript. A restriction, and again, this is evolving as JavaScript itself evolves, is that when you do a callback, you may end up doing lots of nested callbacks if you're doing something that's very complicated. Again, another way around the con, and so this is one of the things that I always look for, is if you have a blocker or a barrier, how do you get around that barrier? And so, for instance, when you're talking to your recruiter, you can say, look, the reason why I use Node.js is that it's fast, it's event-based driven, I can use JavaScript. There are some challenges, but what I do to get around those challenges and that's where you can say that, you may run the complex script off and you may write that in .NET or Java or PHP and then use an API to do the response back into Node.js. So you get the benefits of both worlds, but minimize the investment in having to manage a complex environment such as Java versus a relatively simple environment with Node.js. The Node Package Manager makes it extremely easy to access just an awful lot of functionality. With over 50,000 packages, there's a package for that. So from being able to have a tool that creates unique identifiers that you might need to have for generating content that gets posted into a database, through to being able to connect to databases, through to running so many different solutions. The NPM package manager, with its access to so many different packages, makes it great for getting access to all that content. Now, a con is working with relational databases with Node.js isn't as easy as a NoSQL database. Now, you can do it, and there are ways around that. And what I would do when this question comes up is always kind of pivot to say, hey, this is how you can actually then get around building out that application. Pro for Node.js, designed for streaming huge amounts of data in and out. A con is that Node.js is single-threaded, and so it can be CPU intensive. But again, there are ways around that, and a good way around that is scaling your solution in elastic environments such as the cloud. So what is the command used to import an external library? And so to import an external library, the command is the require command. So an example we have here is you're going to start a variable, and the variable is going to be for HTTP, and you're going to then require the HTTP service. That means that the application itself won't run unless the external library, the HTTP library, is installed. Okay, so those were our introductory questions for Node.js. Let's kind of pivot and take a look at the intermediate questions that you would be asked. So what does event-driven programming mean? So event-driven programming means that if something happens, something else will happen in response. So for instance, if you click a mouse, that mouse click is an event. That means something has to respond to that event. Just think of it as cause and effect. It's just the basic motion of physics. So that's what event-driven programming means. You also look at it as a callback function so that when an element is executed, something will happen in response. So what is an event loop in Node.js? So an event loop in Node.js is when you do an asynchronous call. And what that essentially means is that you are sending out data, and then a non-blocking input-output from Node.js is pulling data back in. What is an event emitter in Node.js? So an event emitter has really two areas of focus. One is that it manages the classes that hold all the objects within your event. And we have an example of this on the right-hand side. And then whenever an event actually is thrown, the functions are then called on that event synchronously. So for instance, we have in our example on the right-hand side, we create an event, and then we have the functions that are executed in a series from that event. So let's talk about the API functions in Node.js. So there are two types. One is an asynchronous non-blocking function, and the second is a synchronous blocking function. And the difference between the two of them is asynchronous is that there is no structure to the order for how the API is resolved. Synchronous means that when the feedback from the API is received, you have to execute the response in a series for how the response is sent to you. So what is a package JSON file? So the package JSON file is at the heart of our Node.js package, when we actually will initialize a solution, a folder to be a Node.js package. You'll find that the package itself holds all of the metadata that's particular to the project you're working on, such as project name, version, requirements. You have to have it installed in the root of the directory for the project. And again, look at any of the videos that we have on Node.js. We do have demonstrations within those videos that actually then go through and break out how to create that root package. And you'll see how you can actually then go ahead and update the instructions or the metadata within the package. So here we have an example of what that metadata looks like. So again, this kind of continues that question of what is a package JSON file? And you may be asked, what is the metadata and why is it important? And the metadata is a basic JSON collection of pairing of key details such as name, version, description, and then the custom version that you put. So for instance, under name, you could create a name for your project. There can't be any spaces. What is the version and the description? What is the main or starting path for the solution? Typically, that would be index.js, but it could be anything.js. But index.js is typical simply because index.html is the starting point for a typical web application. So how would you use a URL module in Node.js? So with the URL module, what it allows you to do is really two things. One is that it provides the resolution and parsing of a URL for utilities in your application. And then it allows you to extend your module with built-in solutions and split up the web address into a readable format. So in this example, we have the URL and the response it would give for that URL, which would then be a year and month, and it would be in a readable format. So it would read out as 2020 and then the month. So what is Express.js? Now you've heard me mention this a couple of times in the video, and we actually have a separate video on Express.js. But Express.js is a web application framework that allows you to build out web solutions for both mobile and traditional desktop right inside of Node.js. So it's very easy to use. Being able to install Web.js is as simple as requiring Express to be installed. In the example that we have here on the screen, it's a full solution of showing how to actually build out a solution with Web.js. So in this example, you start off the first two lines, require Express to be installed, and the install comes from Node Package Manager. Then we have a simple application that will then send to the browser window a hello world message confirming that Express is up and running. And then the third block of content, starting with var server, actually will define the port where your application is going to run. So in this instance, the port is going to run on localhost, and the port will be port 8081. And so you can actually go to localhost 8081. And when you do that, that will trigger the application that will forward up the message, hello world. And it's all coming from Express.js. So what are streams in Node.js? So streams are objects that allow you to read and write data continuously back and forth within your application. And there's really 4 different types of streams. There's readable, writable, duplex, and transform. The readable one is streams for which data can be read. The writable is streams that you can actually write to. A duplex is a stream where it is both readable and writable. And transform are streams that can be manipulate the data while it is being read or written. So how do you update and delete a dependency? So say, for instance, we want to install something like Express. So if you wanted to install Express, what you would do is you would just write them inside of your project. You want to go to terminal window and write in the command npm install Express. If you want to update the dependencies within your Node package manager, to update all of them, all you have to do is write the command npm update all dependencies. And then if you want to explicitly uninstall a dependency such as Express.js, that's using the uninstall command. And so that would again be going to terminal window and you would type npm uninstall Express. And again, it's really easy to create a simple server in Node.js that will run a simple command. The HTTP service is actually built into Node.js. You don't need to use Express.js. I typically use Express.js when I want to do a web server because typically what I find is that I will want to go and do something more complicated. But if you want to do something that illustrates just the core functionality within Node.js, you can actually just require the core HTTP service that actually comes as part of Node.js. And then you can actually then go ahead and tell it to create a service and then to write in plain text a command or a text string, such as in this case, it'll be hello world, that would pop out. And then the final line is to then listen that if you go to a web browser that's on port 127.0.01 or localhost and go to port 8080. Once you actually go to that, that will trigger this application and you'll get the text hello world pop up on your screen. So explain synchronous and non-blocking APIs in Node.js. So all the APIs in Node.js are asynchronous, which means that they are non-blocking, which means you can run them continuously and scale around that, which is just fantastic. It's one of the reasons why Node.js can scale so fast. And the API means that the APIs can return data, send data after it's been called, and really increase the efficiency of events as they are triggered within Node.js. So how do you implement async in Node.js? So the example that we have on the left-hand side allows us to trigger async, and it's using the async function. And as you can see in this example, it's actually something that can be done very quickly. In this example, we're actually making a command to localhost and an app that's running on port 3000. And then depending on what we get, if there's an error message, then we'll have error message go to the console log, which is the terminal window. And if we get a response to an application, then we'll actually get a positive response, which would be fetched response. So again, very quick and easy that you use the async function to be able to build out and to get your asynchronous code. So what is the purpose of module exports? So a module export is a way to encapsulate the entire code for a solution in a single package, in a single file. And then you can then share that with other developers, so you're all working from the same environment. So what is a callback function in Node.js? A callback function is essentially that once you run and you've triggered an event and the response has been given, you want to be able to then have a callback to validate that the task is complete. All right, let's move on to the final set of questions, which is advanced Node.js questions. So what is REPL in Node.js? So REPL stands for read, eval, print, and loop. And this is a reference to the Unix and Linux background that Node.js has. So REPL will perform the following tasks. The read will be actually parsing the JavaScript. You'll read that and store it in memory. Eval takes and evaluates the data structure. Print will then print the results, often on a console window or onto a web page. And then loop loops the above command until the user presses Control-C twice. What is the control flow function? So the control flow function is a piece of code that runs between several of the asynchronous functions. And that's it. It actually controls how those functions execute. So how control flow controls the function calls? And it does it through 4 ways. One is it controls the order of execution. It collects the data. It limits the concurrency. And then it also calls the next step in a program. Again, this is a management tool for how your functions are called within Node.js. So what is the difference between fork and spawn methods in Node.js? So the essential difference between the two of them is that if you use the fork method, it will actually trigger and create a new instance of the V8 engine, the engine running Node.js, and will then run the application in that new instance. With spawn, it's somewhat similar. It doesn't actually generate a new V8 instance. So it's actually creating a new process, but it's within the same V8 instance as the previous application that it was spawned from. Explain to me, what is the use of buffer class in Node.js? So with the buffer class, what you're looking at doing is you're actually controlling the raw data of a set of arrays and integers and the memory allocation outside of the V8 heap. Buffer class is used because pure JavaScript is not compatible with binary data. What is piping in Node.js? So piping is the ability to connect the output of one stream to another stream. That could be a data stream, it could be any stream that you're working with. But it does normally get used to pass data from one stream to another. So what are some of the flags used in the rewrite operation files? So R- is used for read, W is for opening a file for writing, A- is opening a file for appending. So the collection that you have here, you don't have to really memorize all of them, but to have a few of them in the back of your mind is always a good reference point. So how would you open a file using Node.js? So the syntax you would use would be the fs.open, and that would then open up a file. Explain to me what callback hell is. So callback hell, also known as the pyramid of doom, is when you have too many nested, unreadable, and unmanageable callbacks intensively cycle within each other. They're constantly reading to each other, and they're not able to resolve the solution. And this is it's a big problem, and this is why it's called callback hell, because you're not able to finalize the app you're working on. What is a reactor pattern in Node.js? And so a reactor pattern is a concept of non-blocking I/O operations. Can you explain to me the test pyramid for Node.js? So the test pyramid, and this is standard for testing for all DevOps, is really split into 3 key areas. You have unit tests, integration tests, and then end-to-end or E2E tests. The unit tests are tests that you actually do in your raw code that you're working on, and the goal there is to be able to validate that the code you're writing is consistently working. Integration allows you to have tests that integrate your raw code that you're working with in your application with other areas of an application. And then end-to-end is the whole system, the whole interface, as it were, for your solution. Describe the exit codes of Node.js. So an exit code is a specific code that identifies the end of a specific process. And examples of exit codes are unused, uncaught fatal exception, fatal error, internal JavaScript evaluation area. These are all good examples of exit codes. So what is middleware? Can you explain the concept of middleware in Node.js? So with middleware, it is the ability to be able to connect to a system and get data from it that's outside of Node.js. So this may be executing a type of code or updating and modifying a request and response to a specific type of object, finishing the request response cycle. Can you explain to me what are the types of HTTP requests that you may use when working with Node.js? There are actually quite a lot, but 4 of them that you might use would be get, post, head, and delete. And these are, if you've done any web application before, particularly if you worked with forms inside of a web application, you're probably very familiar certainly with get and post. Get is the request to retrieve data. Post is generally used for changing state in the data. Head is similar to get, but also asks for a response if there's no body content. So if you're developing an API, this would be a good one to use. And delete is used to delete the predetermined source. So how would you connect to MongoDB database and with Node.js? And you'd use that using the Mongo client. And the example we have on the left-hand side illustrates that. What is the use of Node_env? And so the Node_env is an environment variable that stands for Node Environment in Express Server. So the example we have on the right-hand side allows you to illustrate how you would do that for, say, a production environment. So what are some of the various timing features in Node.js? So the timing functions that you could use here, set timeout and then clear timeout, and use to schedule code execution that you'd have inside of your application. You also have set interval and clear interval to execute a block of code up multiple times in your application. Set intermediate and clear intermediate to execute code that is at the end of your application.
I hope this video was useful for you. If yes, do like and share this video to the maximum. Until then, happy learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.